ThreatLocker implements a least privilege approach to cybersecurity, blocking every executable unless specifically authorized by your team. This methodology mitigates ransomware, supply chain attacks, and zero-day exploits, and ensures protection for your organization 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To learn more about how ThreatLocker can help prevent known and unknown threats in your digital environment, safeguard your data and operations from threat actors, and align your organization with respected compliance frameworks, visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Miss Mandy Logan has joined us. Mandy, welcome.
Why, thank you so much. It's really good to be here. I like
Hey, it's nice to have you.
Why, thank you. I like the sweater.
Hey, thanks. It's
Wu-Tang.
my Wu-Tang Christmas sweater. Sweatshirt, hoodie, I guess you call it.
A jumper for being British. Shout out to
Jumper.
Aaron.
Yeah, it's a jumper.
Wu-Tang Christmas.
Jumper.
That's all it is.
I think we agreed we're going to start with Bootkitty.
I mean, you agreed to it, so
I did agree to it.
I mean, your name is kind of on the show.
Did anyone else see?
I thought this was Bill's Security Weekly. Here's Bill.
Yeah.
Here's Bill.
Yeah.
I'm just curious
Yeah.
if anyone else saw this and like what they thought of it.
I saw it and I didn't get a chance to really dig into it. It's been a week. So tell us about it, Mr. Asadarian.
I guess I super pay attention to stuff like this.
Totally.
Because it is a boot kit. We pay attention to things like that in my day job, but this actually came to across our desk, I should say, before Bootkitty. There was a malware kit. I mean, and everyone knows, like new strains of malware kits and threat actors and botnets all carry ridiculous names, and they all crop up like several times a week at least. So this new malware kit, which comprised of multiple files that someone was analyzing. And I linked to that. So the link in my story number 23 is a link to my Eclipsium blog article that I wrote about it this week. In there, you'll find all of the resources. So like as I talk, if you're like, well, where is that? It's all in that post. So there was a researcher, I don't remember his handle, but they, I shouldn't say, they were analyzing IranUKit. And IranUKit was
Humzack 711.
Thank you. Humzack 711 was analyzing the userland, Linux userland portion. So there was a kernel modules and other shared object files that person was analyzing. Inside of the kind of kit that they were describing were some like bitmap files that were turned out to be exploits for the logo fail vulnerability, as well as some bootloaders, which carried with it payloads to implement the bootkit component. So myself and largely the research and engineering team at Eclipsium were pulling all of that apart, going, how do we detect this? Because it's a new bootkit that we hadn't seen before. Then ESET broke the news that they had analyzed Bootkitty. And initially, when I compared the two samples, they were different hashes. And then it would turn out, as the story unfolded, ESET would update their post and say this wasn't something that was in use by a threat actor. This was actually developed by students as part of a research project out of a university of South Korea. Yeah, South Korea. So that was interesting to watch that unfold. And so there was a lot of interesting details about it. So that's kind of like the high level story. It's touted as the first UEFI bootkit for Linux, which I hate the first thing. I think it sensationalizes it. It is absolutely technically feasible to have a bootkit on Linux. And this wasn't even the first one that we saw in the wild. ESET specifically says, like, we didn't see this in the wild. We just found the sample. I don't know where they found it, whether it was on a system or whether they had uploaded it to VirusTotal or not. So they didn't actually observe it in the wild. So we got to make some of those distinctions. And to kind of back up my claim of like not first kind of thing, there was a bootkit. Where do I talk about that? Dream Boot was 2013 research from Quarks Labs presented on Dream Boot, which wasn't specifically for Linux, but the UEFI bootkit concept they presented at
Was that
a conference.
Quakers Labs or Quarks Labs?
Quarks Labs.
Because it says Quakers Lab in your
Oh
article.
yeah, it does, huh? It must have
Fucking spell
autocorrect.
check.
Yeah, it must have autocorrected it. It is Quarks Labs. So they presented at a conference about a UEFI bootkit concept that could have also been used for Linux. So this isn't a new concept. It is new in the sense that, like, having observed these particular techniques and components being used together, I would say is certainly unique. I don't know why, but I kind of let the fact I said it was the first thing bother me when it really shouldn't have bothered me all that much.
But it's the first they've seen.
It's the first they've seen.
And-
Yeah.
and-
I mean, obviously, bootkits are, so also, if you go further back in history, bootkits are nothing new.
I'll have a similar rant about the first thing later.
Yeah. Master boot record. So before UEFI, code that infected the master boot record was observed and considered a bootkit that was targeted at Unix and Linux systems.
So what does it do? What does it do?
So this Bootkitty at a high level, both strands of it, I believe, are pretty similar in terms of high level functionality. And what it does is, after its initial system compromise, it uses the logo fail vulnerability to exploit the flaw in UEFI that gives the attacker access to manipulate a secure a UEFI variable called the mock or machine owner key. So that basically allows an attacker to put a certificate in there that will be included in the root of trust for secure boot. That certificate is then validates the bootloader version of Grub and kernel and kernel modules so that they pass verification for secure boot. So then the second stage is they load the malicious bootloader, which then loads components into the kernel to implant into the system.
Which are then all trusted because
they're all trusted because they basically exploited a flaw to put. So a machine owner key is, if I have secure boot enabled and I have let's say a kernel module that I want to run and be validated in secure boot, but the secure boot existing root of trust does not have certificates for that validate that software, I can, from the operating system, install a machine owner key or a mock using the mock utils, and largely on Linux systems. And when I do that, it's basically like I have to be root. I go in, I say, add this key into the mock list. It puts it, I believe, in a UEFI variable, if I'm not mistaken. And it says, okay, like, you're good for now. Then when so I have to give it a passphrase at that point as well.
Okay, that was going to be my question. Now,
when I reboot the system, I have to be physically present at the system, and it takes me to a screen. It's like, hey, a new key was added to the mock list. Enter your passphrase. And once I do that, it says, okay, do you want to add this key? I say yes. It adds the key, and then that software can then be validated in secure boot. And this also works for kernel signature verification, which is typically part of secure boot, how secure boot hooks in to validate kernels and kernel modules. But you can also implement it independent of secure boot to basically say, any kernel module I add into my Linux kernel has to be signed by a certificate that I trust before it'll be allowed to be in the kernel. And I want to experiment with enabling that without secure boot as a verification mechanism, because I think it's interesting.
So, not to be too like vendor, but how would you detect this? Or like, if you like, how would you even go about understanding if you are impacted by this? Or I mean, I just have no idea.
In this particular sample, Bill, your bootloader will either change or get swapped out for another bootloader. And so, like, most of the time, like, your bootloader doesn't change, right?
Yeah.
Changes if you update the operating system, and it has to put a new version of Grub on the system to patch something, a vulnerability or any kind of software, right? That's a pretty infrequently occurring. Like, your bootloaders tend to be pretty static. So what I wrote up in my post, I mean, Eclipsium software does this, right? I don't sound like a shill, but what I recommend is that you track changes to things like your bootloader. Like, if your bootloader changes,
right,
you should get an alert, because it's not frequently occurring. Also, I believe, and this is something that we're working on, because it's intended functionality, but the number of times a machine owner key gets added is pretty infrequently occurring
Sure.
as well. So to me, I mean, it's not anomalous by itself, but it's certainly indicative that there could be an attack happening. So those are two events, Bill, that I would recommend for people if you want to detect these kind of attacks. Detect if your bootloader changes, and detect if someone's mucking with basically the root of trust in secure boot. Obviously, you have to have secure boot enabled. So you should also be looking for systems that don't have secure boot enabled in your environment, because that's a red flag. The kernel level stuff, so what the malware does like after it's loaded, is pretty standard, like kind of EDR style detections. We implemented some detections for the kind of bootloader stuff, or actually more in the kernel and userland style level of detection of things that they're doing that is anomalous. I don't have a whole ton of details. It's one of my things I gotta work on, is really understanding, okay, like what specific behavior are we detecting on those particular devices that may become compromised. So also, I think one of the other things that I like to pick on about this story is so there's got a ton of media coverage. I mean, you couldn't open up any kind of newsreader without seeing something about this.
Yep.
Man, all the articles are like, well, this particular malware, it exploited a vulnerability that was, labeled as logo fail, so you should make sure you patch against logo fail. There's like thousands of other ways over time to be able to either bypass or exploit either UEFI or some secure boot component on your systems, right? I mean, our platform, I mean, our company that I work for was kind of founded on the premise of, the founders were actually some of the first people presenting at conferences back in like 2012, 13 about secure boot bypasses and UEFI exploitation. So that it's not specific to logo fail. So don't just go, well, I'm patched against logo fail, so I'm good. Like, no, like make sure you got the latest version of firmware that has patched all other vulnerabilities that you can patch on your systems that may live in UEFI. Is also my advice. Again, this one's kind of lame in that it changes the bootloader on disk, kind of similar to the way that the Black Lotus malware worked, and it also shares that similarity, or not yet, but my fear it's going to show that same behavior and path that we saw with Black Lotus. If you remember the Black Lotus bootkit, it showed up as something you could purchase on a dark web or whatever you want to call that forum, right? As a black hat hacker, I don't know what you call it today, right? But it's a malicious toolkit that someone could purchase. And then sometime later, we saw that actually being used in the wild. So here we have a similar situation where Bootkitty is a thing that was developed by students at a university, but now we've all analyzed it and we've all talked about exactly how it works, and everyone has access to the binaries and can see exactly what it's doing. I think it's only a matter of time before it follows the same path, before we're starting seeing this come out. Like, why not?
So
right?
when you say, you need to, that we can't rely on just patching logo fail or whatever, well, is that, what does that mean? Does that mean that like I need to upgrade my, my BIOS, or,
Yeah,
how are those
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. So typically, and this is where it gets heavy into a supply chain topic, is that Intel makes the chip, they make certain software development kits available. AMI, Inside, Phoenix make the UEFI software. Your OEMs, Dell, Lenovo, HP, then put the system together and customize that UEFI software. Then it gets delivered to you. So when we find a vulnerability, it could be in AMI software. It could be in the reference kit EDK2 that Intel maintains for UEFI, or it could be in the specific customizations that Dell, Lenovo, HP, or others have made to the BIOS. So it's only on this particular Dell, branded laptop. I'm not picking on Dell. I'm just an example, right? So it's in that customization, and so Dell, Lenovo, HPs of the world, and others, of course, will have to implement the fix, but they'll have to get that sometimes upstream, from what do they call? I think they call it the IBV. I forget what that stands for. I'm in a mental blank, but the AMI Phoenix insides of the world, right?
Well, I doubt. I mean, I wonder how many enterprises consider, keeping, the I'll just keep saying BIOS, but like
Yeah,
keeping
yeah.
that up to date, right? Like
It's
that.
it's a challenge, right? It's another attack surface that often does not get as
Yeah,
much attention as it should because of the luxuries it would afford to attackers and stealth and persistence, reinfections, high level of privilege on the system. So and it's like a whole other UEFI is like a whole other operating system
yeah,
that loads before your operating system, and it's an attack surface that again, the pre-operating system threats is where I live in my day job, but also I'm very concerned about because you can put all these protections in your operating system, but if the attackers are loading code before that into the
doesn't matter
bootloader is the next level down, right?
for sure.
And so that's one level. It's pretty easy to recover from a bootloader because it's software, it lives on the disk. But if the attackers go before that, now you're living somewhere in UEFI, and it can just keep reinfecting and circumventing controls in the operating system. So
And I'm curious, so in corporate environments, how many machines are UEFI based?
pretty much all today.
I would
Okay.
imagine all of them too. Yeah,
Yeah.
like high percentage.
Yep.
Yeah, I've not seen too many systems out there that are using older like master boot record style
Okay.
level BIOS. There is still a compatibility mode sometimes that will be enabled.
Yep.
So you may have a UEFI BIOS, but in compatibility mode, it's still loading without UEFI. So
Okay.
that's tends to be more common today than not having UEFI. at all.
I'd argue that the non-UEFI stuff is the stuff that you're finding in your data center server room for those that still have them,
Mm,
and are the legacy systems that
really
are
old.
around to
Yeah,
support
really old systems.
something.
Correct.
Yeah,
At
So
this point,
critical
really old.
infrastructure, like ICS stuff too, or
could possibly
Yeah,
be.
like when we talk about the critical infrastructure, whether it's a transportation like train service or whether it's water, whatever it is, and they're running Windows 95 or Windows NT or those older operating systems, likely those would be running on hardware that has not yet had
for
the
sure.
luxury of UEFI. One of the reasons was security that we developed. Intel and Microsoft developed UEFI. Was to get around the fact that like without that you could just infect the master boot record
And
and load stuff before the operating system with no controls at all. So
The good old
it's
days.
the good old days. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we
Well,
talk
I was
about. Membroni. Membroni is one of the like last ones that was super popular. That was a master boot record infection kind of virus.
Mandy, you look like you were going to say something there.
oh well, because I was reading the referenced article from 2014, the posting on Virus Bulletin by
Yeah, that was interesting research from who was that
Eugene
from?
Rodionov and Alexander
Yeah,
Matrosov and David
correct.
Harley.
Gesundheit.
Huh?
Gesundheit. That was a mouthful.
Well, they were referencing, of course, this is from 2014, so they were referencing the bootkit infections in Microsoft Windows 8.
Right. Yeah, that's when we started seeing UEFI, but there was still systems without UEFI.
And I mean, they're saying back then that UEFI was a target of choice for researchers in offensive security, I guess because it was just
was
getting
still
pushed
kinda
out more and
new.
more. It was new, right?
It had been developed up until that point, but we started seeing more widespread adoption around that point in time. I don't remember the dates exactly, but if you go to Below the Surface, I did an interview with like Vince Zimmer, who was one of the folks at Intel that helped develop, along with many others, right? But he kind of went through the history of how it was developed, when it was developed, why it was developed. He's kind of the like UEFI historian, if you will. Nice. So yeah, well, let's I talk about this stuff all day. Let's talk about something else.
Yeah, you're very passionate about that. So
It's the world I
kinda-
live in, man.
Yeah.
Speaking of passionate about it, how about your story number 26, Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is another one that.
This
So
is-
I just want to set the stage because I want to say Larry and I.
Wait, is this the Lazarus Group one or no?
No, this is the
nearest neighbor
nearest
attack.
Nearest
neighbor
neighbor,
attack
okay.
is what they called it. Larry and I might have called it something different in 2005-ish time frame over a beer.
Yep, and in fact, right up front, we're gonna who is the folks that discovered this in the thing there?
Volexity?
Volexity, yes.
Volexity.
Yeah.
Volexity referred to this as a novel new attack that they had never seen before, and they had never seen before. And the irony is that we have been teaching this method as part of the wireless class for SAN 617 for 6 or more years.
Yeah, because when Larry and I, this is part of the history of the podcast, right? And like next year is going to be the 20th anniversary of the show, and in 2005, Larry and I are in Josh Wright's wireless class.
Yep.
And we recorded episode 1 of the podcast actually at that conference.
Yep.
And I mean, it's still true today. If you want to execute wireless attacks, and we just did the gadget segment, right? A lot of these gadgets can execute Wi-Fi attacks. And certainly back then, you needed special hardware and software to be able to attack Wi-Fi networks. And Larry and I were like, I don't know, that's kind of inconvenient. Like people are, and I think it was stemming from people dismissing Wi-Fi attacks as someone has to be in physical proximity and have specialized gear. Now, certainly the specialized gear thing is kind of,
I mean, back in the day, you
needed.
Yeah, you wanted to sniff stuff. You needed to have a specific card,
right?
With specific drivers, right? And if you wanted to inject packets, spoof packets, you had to have yet a different card with a different set of drivers, and sometimes you were using both at the same time.
And more than once over beers, Larry and I were like, so how do we do it without that specialized stuff? How do we compromise a computer on a network somewhere and use the existing Wi-Fi capabilities in that system to then launch attacks against either the local Wi-Fi network or adjacent Wi-Fi networks? So it was like, hey, it would be great if I could pop someone in this building, but my real target is in the building across the street. And now I don't need to be in physical proximity. I don't need big antennas. Like I'm in proximity. Now I can, maybe it's a building and they're on just different floors within the building. I mean, we had all those discussions almost 20 years ago now.
So the best part was I was in Amsterdam teaching the wireless class. And the day after we taught, 2 days after we taught this
I'll explain it in more detail too,
and we definitely, with this stuff, this attack came out. We had the big news story about it. And on that day, on day 1, when we taught the methodology, we refer to it in the SANS wireless class as bridging the air gap. And one of my students said, this whole section the name is not correct. He said, bridging the air gap is if you were to bridge an air gap into a completely air gapped network. And he was German, so I mean, I get he was being very pedantic because he's German.
I appreciate that, though.
And agreed.
I think he's correct.
Actually, and I hadn't thought about it that way. Yeah. And this came out, and I'm like, nearest neighbor. Like,
does that work better?
Like,
we're all in agreement. Like, yeah, actually, it does. I don't take issue with the name at all.
So like, I kind of like the name. So.
There was a lot of speculation, but I finally read the article.
Yeah,
because I was working on different things. I actually wrote up 2 other things that aren't public yet, and then wrote up Bootkitty, and then today came up for air and went. I had this flagged, and I heard some other people talking about it, and there was some speculation as to what exactly it was, and then I read it, and I came up with this summary.
So nearest neighbor.
Attackers are going after Organization A.
Let's make this a little bit more personable.
You want to call Organization A something different?
Yeah. Attackers are going after
the U.S. Embassy.
U.S. Embassy.
Okay. Attackers are going after the U.S. Embassy, but the embassy's public-facing services require MFA. Perhaps the attackers already have valid credentials from password spraying, and perhaps MFA bypass in this situation is difficult.
Yep.
I'm just speculating there, but that's...
They've got it from password spraying. Maybe they've got it from credential stuffing.
They have credentials.
Maybe they don't even have credentials
at all.
Right.
Info stealer, whatever.
Yeah. So all of their phishing attempts have gone... challenged unsuccessfully. Then they're having a hard time getting in.
So then the embassy's Wi-Fi network does not require MFA, but uses the same set of enterprise credentials.
Yep,
right?
uses something like WPA2 with PEEP.
Yep.
With PEEP, right?
It requires a username and password tied to their internal directory store.
So the attackers then pivot, and they find a nearby organization, physical proximity nearby,
Yep.
within Wi-Fi range of the U.S. Embassy.
Yeah, like say across the street.
Across the street, like
Like-
it's probably not in the same building, but yeah, adjacent.
Like maybe a print shop, for example.
Right.
Hell
And then
yeah.
they begin to compromise systems on that organization's
Yeah, at the
network,
print
not
shop.
the US, at
They-
the print
they-
shop.
yep,
All right,
they-
we'll call it a print shop.
yep,
So the
they-
print shop,
They send some some phishing in. They compromise some systems at the print shop.
or I think in this case, the print shop had public-facing services without MFA enabled, and that's how they got into the print shop. And they get into the print shop computers, and they start looking for computers that have two things. The computer has a wired internet connection,
Mhm.
and it has a Wi-Fi adapter.
Yep.
And so this gives the attackers the ability to maintain a connection over the wired
Yep.
network,
And then
and then manipulate the Wi-Fi.
manipulate the Wi-Fi adapter to their will.
Now,
and not
once,
get disconnected.
once the system's found, the attackers configure the Wi-Fi adapter to connect to the embassy's Wi-Fi network.
Before they even do that, they could start leveraging that Wi-Fi adapter to do all sorts of other things.
Oh yeah, you can
You know,
sniff.
start doing some sniffing,
Reconnaissance.
you name it. Gather packets,
Mm-hmm.
shuffle those packets back to their
Correct.
evil lair to do post processing, finding password exchanges. Analyze the security. They may not have even known what the Wi-Fi network's
Right.
capability was at the embassy,
Mm-hmm.
but they could have used that system from across the street at the print shop to determine that, hey, they're using WPA2 with PEEP, and
they
I already
did. So-
have these credentials.
I didn't analyze the PowerShell script, but they ran a PowerShell script
I did not know they ran a PowerShell
on the Windows computer in our scenario at the print shop.
Yep.
To collect data about Wi-Fi networks. I haven't looked at the PowerShell script to see what it did, but that's what they did. So basically, they do that.
NetSH WLAN show.
Yes, right, exactly. So
Yeah.
then they connect to the embassy's Wi-Fi network. They have the credentials, and
Yep.
they persist. Now, the wrinkle to this one is in the actual attack, as Velexity was doing incident response, they realized that it was actually multiple organizations they hopped through. So
Yep.
there was a third organization, so they compromised that one to get to the print shop, to get to the embassy, kind of thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And again, it had to be the system in the print shop that had the wired and wireless.
Yeah,
Correct.
whatever the
Okay.
the next point in the chain was a business or another organization across the street from the intended victim, say the embassy.
Very important point.
Okay.
And this was kind of debated a little bit in a couple of podcasts or whatever, but at no time were the attackers physically in proximity, in our case, to the U.S. Embassy.
Right. They could have been literally halfway across the world.
Right. There was no
Yeah.
no local Velexity did the entire investigation. And they're like, look, this happened from thousands of miles.
Yep.
Was it Kaminsky's line? You're only 3 milliseconds away from every creep on the internet.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and and you think about all of the open source intelligence and all of the stuff that is available nowadays to be able to make something like that happen. Like,
Oh,
hey,
yeah.
you want to attack the embassy? Great, go to Google Maps and find out what businesses are across the street
Yeah, it's
that,
not
that are that are within reasonable Wi-Fi range. You go find all of those businesses. You start doing all sorts of searches to figure out what their providers are, what maybe IP address ranges, what web services
you could
they've
probably
got.
pull the Wiggle database from that location if it has data about
Yep.
that,
Right.
and use that as a start.
Totally. And yeah, then you start finding that, there's wireless in these businesses. They probably got wireless adapters. You think about the types of businesses they are and that they might have systems that have wired and Wi-Fi. And you start looking at, what the businesses, you try to go to their web pages. If they're smaller mom and pop type of deals, maybe they're not running their web server in the cloud. Maybe it's running on a PC in the back room that has a wireless adapter. This is a perfect type of attack. Like all the reconnaissance and that type of stuff you can do sitting halfway across the world using
Also,
available
I
information.
feel
is
like
just
one of the things
amazing.
that's changed in the past 20 years, Larry, the perfect person to answer this question is the ability to put more commodity cards, Wi-Fi cards, adapters into monitor mode probably greatly increased from the time that we were doing.
God.
right?
Oh God, yeah. Like there.
I mean, there's still limitations. But
Yeah,
there's still ones that you can't necessarily get in the
so-
but you don't need it for this attack that we're talking
So
about. But just in general,
let's break it down here. Linux. There are definitely still some cards under Linux you can't put in a monitor mode. Like it doesn't support it. But there are so many nowadays that support monitor mode. Maybe you don't have packet injection, but I have a hard time thinking of which ones you actually can't do monitor mode. And usually those are Broadcom ones.
For our audience, monitor mode is the ability to capture raw 802.11 frames on a given channel.
Yes.
Which means in the scenario that we displayed out, let's say the U.S. Embassy has an access point that's on channel 6, and I'm adjacent. I can put a Wi-Fi adapter on that same channel, and I can get all of the Wi-Fi communicate 802.11 frames that are transmitted on channel 6.
Yeah, which would include the embassy and everybody else on channel
and anyone
6.
else transmitting on channel 6.
And it is the really important stuff, the Wi-Fi, the 802.11 stuff at layer 2 that you are capturing at that point. If you're not capturing in monitor mode, you're capturing effectively at layer 3. So you're not seeing all the goodies for all of those folks about how they connect to networks and the types of security and the advertisements and all of
and the
those
handshakes
and all of that stuff.
Yeah,
anything at layer 2 you're missing. So Linux, all right, maybe few and far between. No monitor mode. The Mac, no problem, built in.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Airport command. Airport command, as long as you have sudo rights. Yep. This is so as long as you have super user rights. Now the airport command is going away. It's being replaced with some other stuff that I'm not positive, but I'm likely sure that monitor mode will still be available there. We just need to do a little bit more research on that and just getting some systems available to do that. Windows, as of NDIS 6. So prior to NDIS 6, NDIS 5, if you wanted monitor mode, the manufacturers of the wireless adapters had to support it in the drivers that they were providing. You wanted a wireless adapter, MediaTek wireless adapter, MediaTek had to provide the drivers, and they had to have it supported in their drivers. Now, there's very little incentive for an average wireless adapter manufacturer to go the extra length to include the debug functionality that is useful to few in their drivers, so they just didn't do it. Very few wireless adapters under Windows NDIS 5 had it. But as of NDIS 6, Microsoft took over the framework for doing wireless drivers, and with the NDIS 6 networking stack, monitor mode exists in Windows as a core.
Oh, that's just like in similar to macOS.
Yeah. You just now need to have a tool to enable it. So it's all handled by Microsoft's native Wi-Fi drivers. If Microsoft has a native Wi-Fi driver and that native Wi-Fi driver is in use on that system, Microsoft can trigger monitor mode. Microsoft wrote that for you. Now you need some tools to be able to do that. First one is Netmon. It's not installed by default. Netmon has been deprecated, but it still works. I'm not sure about Windows 11. The other one is NPCap. NPCap is the default capture engine for Wireshark 3 and later.
Gotcha.
So, just go install Wireshark.
Is that Fyodo's NPCap library?
Yeah. So
no?
It's part of the. I believe it was part of a Google Summer of Code project by some students and was largely adopted by Nmap and Wireshark.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
I think that was students working for Fyodor.
I think you are correct.
Yep. Yeah, I remember that. All right.
So hey, come take SAN 617
You
and
can learn more about that.
Learn more about it. And in fact, this super advanced attack that was never before seen by Velexity, you learn about on day 1. This is the level set. Day 1 is the quote level setting day where you learn about the 802.11 protocol and all this type of stuff and a bunch of terms, and you learn about these types of attacks on day 1. Plug. Shameless plug. It only goes up from there. So, honestly, this is one of those, like, in the last, 10 years or so, Paul, this was one of those pivotal moments in wireless attacks. Like when, oh my God, here's our chance type of thing. Like, this is a big deal. To me, this was one of those those big deals with the nearest neighbor attack, and like, yeah, it's amazing to see that the things that we've been teaching actually were being used. And the joke that I always tell about this particular module in the class was, you know, when we were putting this in the class, and it was really awesome, and Josh Wright was the one that actually started putting this together for class, was like, when Josh put it together, I told Josh that, wow, this is really cool, but I'll never use it until I did.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I did, it changed everything. It changed how I approached so much, even just an internal pen test. The things that we include in that particular section have changed the way I think about so much else. And now to see someone actually putting that into practice, arguably for evil, is really cool.
You know, I'm gonna say, like, I honestly thought this was going on before.
I feel like pen testers use this technique.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been teaching it for 6 years or more in the class. So you can't tell me nobody's been using it. Like, it's sexy. It's smart.
And I feel like if threat actors have used it, we just haven't detected them using it.
Yep. I think
we
so
know
too.
pen testers use it because
I
it's in the
agree, 'cause
report, right?
Or we've detected it and we haven't been able to talk about it.
Right, that too.
Maybe, but I guess I really thought it was like more commonplace even 8-9 years ago. I don't know. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I'm with you, Mandy. You'd think. Like,
well, the Velexity team's really good. I've done work with them in the past, right? And they work on some very, very high level cases. So, you know, maybe this was just the first big use of it. You know,
the first one that they could actually talk about.
Right.
Well, because even this, it started in February 2022, right?
Oh,
yep.
Bill, was there another
February
story
4th.
that piqued your interest?
Those were the two big ones for me, Paul. I wanted to hear those two. Let me see. Yeah, let's talk about AI red teaming.
Yeah, you know, man. I don't know why I don't get really excited about AI red teaming stuff. I don't know why. Maybe I should. Maybe someone needs to help prove me wrong. But I see a lot of articles, and I feel like it's kind of like accident jumping, that AI and LLMs are the shiny new hot technology. Therefore, the shiny new hot cybersecurity topics should be, how do we hack it? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily. I just think the risk profile. Jeff's not here to correct me. Like, I can't use the word risk unless it's like 110% accurate.
No, he's not here. You can use it however you want.
All right. So the risk profile, I'm not overly concerned about it. I'm not overly concerned if an attacker can perhaps get around guardrails on an LLM, or conduct some kind of cross-site scripting, or trigger command injection through an LLM as an attack vector. I guess that for me, that particular attack would be super important if inside of my product there was an avenue where you were interfacing with the LLM component, and an attacker could then turn that into command execution, right? Because then that's command execution in the product that I'm delivering. That could be a bad day. I think in the public LLMs, right, your Chat GPTs, Perplexity, Gemini, whatever Microsoft Copilot, okay. I mean, command injection is one thing, but also like getting sensitive data out of them. Like, if the goal is I want to somehow mine that data to get sensitive data out, okay. I put some source code in an LLM. Like, go ahead, all right, go find it. Right? Like, I think we got way more things to work.
Yeah,
I do think we should be talking about that and thinking about it. I don't think it's an immediate threat.
So
today,
arguably,
people will argue with me on that. That's
doing testing against stuff like ChatGPT and Copilot, like, maybe not the right risk model. But if you think about how quickly organizations are adopting AI that are not necessarily using public models, that have a whole bunch of very interesting training data that are being used for very specific types of decisions.
Sure.
that if that data were to be poisoned, or if someone were to take control of underlying systems running those, that could be really bad timing. Like
I think if there's
what happens if your insurance company is using AI to determine whether or not you're eligible for specific types of services and coverage, and that data becomes poisoned because the AI has been poisoned not to fund anything for folks that have cancer.
if there are provable, observable attacks that if I'm running a local model and maybe the model's local, but the where I got it from is open source like Llama or wherever, and so I'm analyzing Llama and I can find some kind of attack and I can apply that to an actual attack against, in your case, example, an insurance company. Yeah, that's something we need to make sure that we have defensive measures against and a process for remediating that vulnerability. And if that's happening, please send stuff my way that proves that is happening and or feasible. I think there's a lot of research papers. I think we will get to that point eventually, but I'm not sure that that's an immediate concern. And I'm usually not like this on things.
So Paul, I think you're exactly right though. I think that the way that you phrased it is exactly right. Is that we're not quite there yet, but and right, the way that you said that there's a lot of research papers, I completely agree with. But I'm also agree that this is going to be a problem that we're going to have to deal with, right? And so I would prefer that the research and I'm glad that somebody is considering those things now, right? Before this becomes a big issue. But I agree. Like, it's not a hit the red button, stop everything emergency yet, right? We're not quite there yet. I don't think.
But I also think we have time to develop effective defensive techniques and countermeasures to this as well.
Yeah.
In that maybe the decisions don't happen completely automated out of the gate. There has to be other checks and balances, just like we have any kind of automation, AI side, any other kind of automation. We tend to put checks and balances in because we need to have, can't fully trust the fully automated processes.
Yeah, I had a story a couple weeks ago. NVIDIA released Grok, which was a LLM vulnerability scanner. So I think that tools like this, they're starting to emerge, right? And so if you are in a company, and I think I even said when we brought it up, but I've had companies come to me and say, "Hey, we're deploying a local LLM on site, and we want it to be assessed." It's not very clear to me. Like, okay, well, what do you want to be assessed, right? Like, what are those things that you're wanting?
Yeah.
And I think Grok really solves that problem. It's a project on GitHub released by NVIDIA that helps test for those. It's a good starting point for, hey, we have a way to at least test our local LLMs for these types of risks or threats.
What's interesting when you say that, Bill, I'm reminded of like Docker and Kubernetes technologies that I think has gone through the same the evolution of, well, like, hey, it's great. Like, basically we can have our own microarchitecture and cloud in our own hands. And holy crap, was security terrible in the beginning?
For sure.
And there are still, people that put out vulnerable stuff. I think I came across an article, I didn't put it in there, but your Docker API is exposed to the internet. We got hit with that attack years ago at Security Weekly. I was like, oh, that's configuration. We need to not do that, clean it up, and we move on with life. And then since then, tools have gotten much better at hardening and detection for how you implement Docker and Kubernetes environments. LLMs to me seem like a similar kind of technology that's going to go through the same progression, where I'm now got my own models that I'm running locally, and crap, in the beginning, it's all new, going to make a lot of mistakes. There's going to be security vulnerabilities. Tools and techniques are going to evolve that will allow me to implement those more securely. And of course, there's always that smaller percentage that just doesn't get it and puts WordPress out there, on the internet or whatever. Like, it's all, technology that try and help make our lives better and are easier, make it easier for us to accomplish tasks that require that level, a level of security that varies. But overall, I mean, WordPress aside, I feel like Docker and Kubernetes, we've gotten much better.
Yep.
at-
And admittedly, it's to change a little bit of that parallel. When Docker and Kubernetes were coming out, like I remember linking to an article back in the day about it was like Kubernetes, and in order to use Kubernetes, you like had to have all this magic with sadomasochists and like,
Yeah.
and it was like if you need to do this, you need to have this thing that's not well documented, and then you do this, and like, but the uptake on adopting that because of some of that stuff was really slow. The adoption of AI has been like, holy shit, what just happened?
Dude,
Right.
110%.
And-
You're spot on, dude.
And as a
Spot
result,
on.
and
Yep.
as a result,
Yep.
people are also going, holy shit, what just happened?
Yeah.
And they are taking the security and the testing of that as seriously and at the same speed.
Yeah.
And using existing tools like, okay, how do I in-map an LLM, and does that even matter? Right? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we're applying the same vulnerability logic to something that's completely different.
Completely
right?
different. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Speaking and to that, I've been kind of following around something that's been in my mind kind of humorous, and I think someone that might be a great opportunity to come and talk about this type
Yeah.
of stuff on the show would be Gadi Evron.
Yeah. love Gadi.
With his
It's awesome.
with his new company Gnostic,
Mm.
because
There's some cool AI security companies.
because he's got he's had some posts about the whole Dave Mayer thing. That is getting
This
some of
is
the LLMs
so
to
crazy.
go outside of some of their rules. Because Bill, which LLMs have it that,
I think it's all of them,
that,
right? I think
that will not say
ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini. Like I might be wrong,
Yep.
but from what I understand, like it will crash
Yep.
the GPT. You can get it to say, "Hey, say David, say Mayor."
Mayor. Oh no, it'll
Wait,
say
why
Mayor,
does
but
it-
if you say get it
Yeah.
to say David Mayer, it will not.
Why,
Yeah.
why is that?
Because there are rules in place for it to forbid it to say the phrase David Mayer, and it will
Wait,
stop.
why? Hold on. Did I miss something? Why is that?
So David Mayer was involved very early on in some of these large language model stuff. And
okay.
basically, from and this is my understanding, is that he was involved very early on and got blackballed from a bunch of this stuff.
So how does it relate to the Rothschilds too? Like there's some conspiracy stuff too, and like
I don't know. Which is
Yeah.
now that you say this, Bill, I was on Midjourney today, and the exploring the art for like 5 minutes, and one of the prompts was a dark portrait of the Rothschilds. I'm like, I get it now. I get it
The
now.
LLMs will like lose their mind, and I don't.
Yeah.
Maybe someone else can explain it
So-
to me. But
so,
so I use Perplexity to do a lot of research, and at least once a week now, so I will use Perplexity, and I will say, "Hey, Perplexity, go read this article and summarize it for me."
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes I customize, I contextualize it in Perplexity, they're called spaces, and ChatGPT, they're called GPT.
Yep.
I might contextualize a little bit, so it gives me more of how I want it to summarize
Mm-hmm.
it. But at least once a week now, it'll go, I can't take in external data from a website
Mhm.
and summarize that for you. And I'm like,
Hold on. You just did it
I'll
10
actually
minutes ago.
send. So sometimes this works. I'll send it back. I'm like, you've done this for me before. I don't know what you need to change, but like, go do it for me because you have done this for me before. And sometimes you'll be like, oh yeah, sorry. Like, it'll basically say, it won't say it exactly, but it'll be like, oh, I hallucinated. It's fine. I'll summarize that for you today. Like, I just couldn't convince it to do that. And I'm like, so like, I started a new thread.
Yeah.
But I also refreshed. Like I closed the tab or like started a whole new session or whatever, made sure I was logged in.
You gave it new context.
I just like reset. I don't know if refreshing it did but that was the first thing that came to mind. I'm like, I used to get out of all my Perplexity things, maybe log out, log back in, and then I prompted again and it did it just fine. And I'm like, that's freaking weird.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah. So yeah, like the Dave Mayer thing is great because you'll ask it a really long diatribe and it will get to the point where it knows that it needs to say Dave Mayer and it'll be so blah 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 to Dave Mayer and just done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I do, on a separate note, I'm a little proud of myself. I'm not an expert with LLMs. There are people that know how to use it way better than I do, and I'm just trying to keep up and follow along and make it work for me. I did create after multiple failures, a pretty good perplexity space that can write as Paul Asadorian.
Nice.
And
That's
but
fantastic.
I would just quickly want to caution people. Like, so what I did was I took my last 10 or so blog posts and I turned them into PDFs. And then I created a space and I uploaded all 10 PDFs.
Yep.
Here's
Here's 10 PDFs with a writing style. Let's
Right.
call this Paul Asadorian style.
So when you create a space, I think it's similar to create a GPT. You can give it files.
Yep.
And you can give it prompts to run all the time. So I said, use the attached files to create Paul Asadorian's running style and use eclipsium.com/blog as the primary resource. Right. So it's kind of tuned for when I write about topics that have to do with Eclipsium.
Bootkitty.
So, but
Quaker-
what it won't
Quaker-
do,
Oh, I
Quaker
spent all
slabs.
this time writing this article.
let me finish. What it won't do, it won't write a complete blog article for me.
No.
It won't. However, if I'm writing an article and I go, I need a paragraph on this.
Yep.
It'll write that paragraph pretty well. Like, I mean, I still have to tweak it, obviously, but I'm like, it'll write that paragraph really well. And then what I did was, once I got the whole article written, I'm terrible at writing the summary or conclusion at the end. Like, I'm just tired of writing about this topic. I'm like, I gotta
It's
summarize
great. It's
everything I
great
wrote.
for that.
So I PDF everything that I've written and I funnel it in. I'm like, here's an article that I
Summarize this
wrote.
article.
Write me 5 to 6 sentences for a summary. I was like, in my contextualized space.
Yep.
And it was like, I mean, it nailed it. I still have to modify it, obviously, but like 90% of the way there, I was like, okay, this is now becoming more of a tool. And I'm sure others have gotten to this point way before I got to that point, but I'm just kind of proud of myself.
So I do want to call something out here. You're being very, very careful as you were telling that story to be like, and I got to change it and I got to fix it and I got to do all this stuff. Man, get over that. Like, so what you're doing,
minor changes, Bill.
Yeah, but
less changes than I've made in the past. I will say.
You're using the tools that you have available to you to be more efficient and effective, right? Like,
Correct.
so it's fine.
Yes.
Like, it's fine.
So, but here's the thing: if I don't use the tool to help me do this stuff, I get in trouble.
Taken 3 months.
They're like,
right?
why? Yeah, they're like, what?
Yeah.
Your management will come to you and be like, did you use an AI to help you with that? Like, if you say no, they're like, well, why not?
Yeah.
You absolutely should be using that.
I hate to say this, and I feel like, do you remember the days when someone would ask a really stupid question and you would respond back with, "Let me Google that for you"?
Yeah.
No,
I think
no
we
excuse
are now coming to the point where it's not "let me Google that for you"; it's "let me Chat GPT that for you."
Well, I think it's becoming standard that it's more. I notice it even with friends of mine, if they're anywhat techie involved. And I'm not saying they're hackers; they're not in this, but there's a number of us where, like over this past weekend, I was at a friend's house, and it is interesting. All three of us, by chance, use Pi AI mostly as our personal, and so it was really fascinating when all of a sudden it's like, oh, have this question, and then one person's like, oh, let me scroll back through my conversations with Pi and find it, and then I have this, and so we had a whole thing that it was instantaneous, that we all turned to our individual Pi, and I don't mean pumpkin pie, but it's like we all turned to that. And Paul, and what you were talking about with using your spaces on Perplexity.
Spaces, yeah.
So I'm curious, have any of you done like this? So I, again, using Pi, I'll say, based on everything you've learned about me through our conversations, I am writing this, or I need to respond to this, or I've already written this, please adjust it and summarize it. And then not as much as in the character of me, but take what style you know of me, and I want it to be more XYZ.
Direct.
Right.
Or, that's how I do it.
Or I'll say direct. Enhance it for that this particular character trait of mine is enhanced. So I want to make sure that it has this, like,
it's all about building the good prompts to get what you want out of it.
Yeah. Well, so to all of you.
Oh well, what I was going to say, no, but real quick. I'm sorry, Bill. What I was going to say then, whenever you read it back, like whenever you get it, and it provides those suggestions. Does it help you start modifying your own lexicon and your own vocabulary in order to expand you? Right, as like, oh, that's what I could do whenever I'm looking to, make sure I'm
Yeah.
bringing out
No,
this trait or this
absolutely. Yeah,
characteristic, like, because
absolutely does.
okay,
I'm too lazy for that. No, I don't think so. I think like I'm just going to ask it to do it again. But I get your point. I think that's really, really interesting, right? That is a very interesting point, like because you're learning from it,
yeah.
right?
No, I'm
Yeah,
learning from it, and I also then have it reread, and I'm going, really? Because, this
That's what you
approach.
think about me? Mhm.
This is-
right.
Hey,
This
I like
computer's
what my
judging me.
Pi AI thinks about me sometimes. But,
Yeah.
like, I found going, oh my goodness, I had no idea that cross samples of the entire population would bring out that these particular words would enhance this character trait or this receptivity or this information. And I feel like it's definitely expanding my thought process on honestly on how a lot of things need to be simplified. But
I will use I'll admit I use Grammarly a lot when in terms
mhm,
of writing for that, and I actually bought the
the
professional
pro.
subscription. And what I find is that if it corrects my grammar, it's spot on now. Like it's gotten
Yeah.
really good at
Same.
just restructuring sentences. Where I'm like, all right, just go restructure that, and then I read it, and I'm like, oh yeah, like that's how I meant to write. Like yeah, that sounds way better.
Yep.
And even I have a lot of writing experience
That's
too.
what was
but
in my brain. That was what's in my brain, but it's not
Yeah.
what just came out.
It's
and,
yeah, and it just saves me so much time, and that's what we should be using it. Like I'm like, what is the Linux command to do this? And I'm like, could you just tell me what that is? Give me some example.
Well,
let me
are you
let
guys-
me no,
I can't keep that all in my
it's not
head.
let me Google that for you anymore.
It's
Yeah,
I asked the
ChatGPT or-
AI. I'm like LLMs. I'm like, tell me what that command is again.
it's a conversation that Bill and I had
Yeah.
yesterday. Was like,
Yeah.
oh man, I just saw this thing on Etsy that was $100, which is ridiculous for what it does, based on the cheap yellow display. And I'm like, all I need is the cheap yellow display to display this animated GIF. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to sit down. I'm gonna have to learn this, and it's gonna take me a couple of days, and I need this done like now because I have no time. And Bill ChatGPT's it, and he has it in like 3 minutes. And now I haven't tested to see whether the code actually works, but it looks really good.
One last thing, and I wasn't sure this was going to work, but when we work in our internal system for show notes, it has a markdown language, and I had a document in just plain text, and so I gave it 2 attachments. I'm like, first attachment is your markdown syntax. Second attachment is my text. Take that text in that document and put it in the markdown language based on that documentation. It was like, boom. I'm like, yes, that is, I love it.
Like, do you guys use Google anymore?
For some things,
yes.
we're like way off topic, but you're hitting on stuff that so on one of my machines, one of my desktops, I've set it Perplexity to the default search engine. And where it falls down though is like if I have a CVE number and I just want to go to like the NVD thing and I just want to pop it in Google and I know that's the first result. And I don't know if it's just that I got to adjust my workflow, but I realized that if I just put a G in my search bar at the top and I down arrow and enter, it goes, oh, you want to search in Google? Because like certain things I do just want a Google search for.
Yeah.
I don't want an LLM explaining like the whole fucking thing to me.
Yeah.
But that's for like maybe 30% of what I'm searching. For 70% of what I'm searching, roughly, I want more of the LLM style answer.
But Bill, I'll give you a prime example where I used Google the other day. Tell me about a Ford Model A manual windshield wiper. Or I need a Ford Model A manual windshield wiper. I wouldn't ask ChatGPT for that because it's going to give me the freaking history of the Ford Model A. And
I don't know. I did that with my gas fireplace though. I used LLMs to find the part.
But you were wanting the part to buy, right?
Correct.
You were wanting to go.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. I even want to see what a picture looked like. Like, yeah.
I think we should talk about Sonicwall and Fortinet.
I don't know. You didn't want to talk about Bill's story today, so
I would. Well, it'll tie into Bill's story. No, this is. I know, but we didn't.
Dude, that's so funny. What's so funny?
I wasn't ready. Okay, tonight. I was ready. Last week I wasn't ready to talk about LLMs. Now I'm ready. This actually ties into Bill's story that he has this week. and it's a
That's
great
so funny.
segue into Bill's story. But my story number 24 is about Sonicwall. It's Sonicwall firmware deep dive part 1. I want to see the whole series because they kind of tease out the whole series, but it's basically how Bishop Fox researchers were able to decrypt the firmware from Sonicwall. Now, what's interesting about the article is that most of the models of Sonicwall firewalls use an SIG firmware format, which they said was, they kind of painted that as that's really hard to break. But some of their more enterprisey level devices use this SWI file format, and that's the one that we focused on. And everyone knows how I feel about encrypted firmware. So the technical portion of this is great, and I'm greatly looking forward to them tearing apart firmware and publishing about it on the internet. But I don't like how we're forced into trusting security appliances by vendors that lock customers out of the underlying components. Like, I feel like they're just encrypting the firmware to protect their intellectual property, not allow for a better experience from their customers who need ways to validate the components and monitor the components that are underneath and inside of these security appliances. They just want to provide the aluminum case with the fancy silk screening and go, here's your firewall, VPN, network appliance. Don't worry about what's underneath the covers. Trust us. It's totally fine. It's totally fine.
And so definitely protecting the intellectual property. I think it's also a method to prevent reverse engineering of said firmware.
Right.
Another assurance that the firmware is being delivered is the actual firmware from the manufacturer, because it's signed with a specific set of keys.
They wouldn't need to encrypt the entire thing. They could do a signature that would validate that.
But no, I mean, they could do a signature that could validate that until that signature method is easily exploitable. And this is part of the reason why we can regenerate signatures for stuff that OpenWrt would match, and would match signatures to put OpenWrt on a whole bunch of stuff.
Potentially.
So, signatures, I don't think signatures are it. It would need to be signed with a private key. The problem that I find with encrypted firmware is that I wouldn't be surprised if many manufacturers are saying, yeah, we're going to do encrypted firmware to protect the firmware, and so to keep it away from prying eyes, so no one can do validation and decipher what's in our firmware, so they can't do reverse engineering, so they cannot discover bugs by going that way. And I'm like, well, shit, I'll just buy one and I'll dump the firmware off of Flash.
Yeah, okay. Like, so you were going, that's when you said that, I was like, So, but what we saw in the Sophos Pacific Rim attacks was China bought Sophos firewalls and then conducted the research. So if you're trying to encrypt your firmware to prevent against threat actors, threat actors are just going to acquire your stuff. And then, like, when it's running on the system, it has to be just like BitLocker, right? It has to be decrypted.
It keeps it keeps honest people honest.
Yeah.
Like, think what a boss move it would be if a firewall vendor, regardless, Fortinet published, their here's our firmware code, boom, open source. Like, not, just they
that's where my brain was going. You started talking, right? Like, why is it a secret? Why is it even a secret?
What that would imply is that, hey, we've done the time. This is good code, right? There is, we've checked it for bugs. There aren't any backdoors. There's no hard coded creds. Like all of those things that I am worried about with these firmware, right? Like, they're thinking about it incorrectly. The reason why they do it is all the reasons you guys just justified, right? That's what their lawyers are saying.
But it's interesting. I don't think it gives them a competitive advantage to try and keep the secret soft, because I'll tell you what, if you're like myself and others and you've looked under the covers, much of it is based on open source components anyway. And if you look at the hardware, much of it is based on commodity hardware anyway. So, like, what? So who cares, right? Like, I think that you're going to go buy a solution based on its merits and its value to you as an organization. To what I don't particularly care in that sense what's under the covers, but give me some access to what's under the covers so I can monitor and verify and protect my own network.
We had this discussion.
This is a reoccurring theme. Well, it's a
we-
reoccurring
we-
theme because
We
all
had
these
we
new
had this
vulnerabilities come out.
discussion on Below the Surface.
Yes, this is exactly the discussion, right?
Yep.
But now we've got new thing like Sonicwall is being picked. And look, I don't want to pick on any vendor. Where like there's great people that work for all these vendors, and I don't want to say every security appliance vendor has ill intentions. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying I want more transparency and ability to validate and monitor the systems and software that we put in our networks. That's the crux of the issue, right?
Oh yeah.
Everyone has vulnerabilities in their software, hardware, and firmware. Everyone does. It's fine. But people are transparent about it. Give us facilities to be able to monitor, to be able to remediate. Also the vendors are doing not a horrible job at patching the stuff too, when it is disclosed. I will give them that. The major vendors, the enterprise vendors, right? I have a list, right? It's Cisco at the top. You can almost like go down in terms of market share, right? You get Cisco, Fortinet, like maybe Palo Alto. What else is in there? Juniper, Avanti, Checkpoint. Who am I missing? Enterprise wide, that's pretty much it, right? Like I could pull up the list. I mean, they've all been patching, like furiously patching, which is good, but we need more. And in terms of, and I'm not picking on Fortinet, it's just my story number 25, which is a very detailed post from Asset Note, is the vendor that disclosed this. It is an extremely detailed post about a memory corruption flaw. Look, memory corruption, we could date back to the 60s, one of the earliest software bugs known to man. But the last part of this was super thought provoking, and I think it hits on the crux of this issue. And this is CVE 2024-21762. It's a FortiGate remote code execution vulnerability. So what they say is this was another case of a network security appliance having a pretty serious memory corruption vulnerability. It's also far from the first from FortiGate. Wait, all right, I'll like strike that from the record. Every software hardware manufacturer has had vulnerabilities. Like no one's more guilty than, I mean, maybe D-Link, but that's not in the enterprise.
Right. Yeah.
That's the one exception.
Yeah.
As is often the case with these issues, the mitigations are known. It's just whether or not they've been applied. Stack canaries were present in FortiGate, but ASLR was not. It seems like a lot of effort has been spent on preventing access to the file system. Back to your points, Larry, right? Yep. Setting up the debugger was a significant portion of the time spent in this vulnerability. Would that effort be better spent on auditing and hardening the application? And I'll add like the code itself. Again, memory corruption is a known vulnerability class, and it's prevalent in these appliances. And mitigations are known for this. ASLR was not applied. Like we know how to reduce the risk of exploitation, but we're not doing it, which is just silly. And the significant effort was put into protecting the firmware and the file system from reverse engineering, yet the underlying code has missing protections and vulnerabilities. This is like my whole take on this is companies are putting more effort in protecting their intellectual property than providing a secure product to their customers. And in this case, the incentives are completely backwards.
I completely agree.
That is my rant, because I've spent way too much time thinking about this, but that is my rant. Like it comes down to the incentives are backwards. Companies are trying to protect their bottom line and intellectual property and not their customers. And that needs to change. I don't know how.
Yeah, we
I don't know,
beat
because
this
that's
up.
across. I say that's money motivated always. I mean, that's
Right.
kind of across all industries.
I mean, we beat this up a lot, but you take a look at like the automotive industry and how they've handled it, right? And
I like how it's like random people in Bill's house all the time. It's so many times in the show he like stops like wave high, like
yeah,
there's always a party at Bill's house.
that's true.
Continue.
But so like if the seatbelt mechanism in your car doesn't work, right? The automotive company, they have to issue a recall. There have
Right.
to be a fix. That like It's their responsibility to fix the issue, not, hey, we issued a patch, right? Like
what you're harping on is there's no accountability
there's
from
no
security appliance value.
accountability,
Yep,
right? Like
that's a huge issue too.
I can't sue Fortinet because they didn't implement ASLR.
Right. Because
I
there's
think
like law, there's things that prevent us from doing that. I believe we've had those conversations with folks. Yeah.
Well, I
that
think
needs to
going
change.
beyond that, it always has shocked me that people, when I guess that I just think with intense foresight or looking at all the steps of where things would be, and I am constantly shocked that designers, or as things go, that people don't automatically build more security in. And going back to like your example of even automotives, same thing. I don't understand, like when you're first building the first cars, how did it take decades to get seat belts whenever you'd think like at any moment you'd go, oh, we're throwing a body in this high moving projectile thing. Let's go ahead and strap it in. And I don't understand how people don't think of those things ahead of time and implement them.
Because it's not an incentive that increases profit. It only
That's right.
increases cost.
That's right. That's
the
exactly
problem.
right. You're exactly right. It's an inverse incentive, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
I want this code written as cheaply and as quickly as possible. Go. Like,
But that's so weird. Like, why remove everything from responsibility?
Well, responsibility, I think, is a different tactic. It's different from seatbelts in that I think that it's security through obscurity, right? In the case of security appliances, it's don't pay no attention to the vulnerabilities.
Never mind the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, never mind the man behind the curtain in this case.
Mandy's kind of right there. Like, so let's say that, okay, let's look at CV 2024-21-762. Whose responsibility is it to fix it? Well, so Fortinet needs to put out a patch, but it's my response. If I get hacked, like through this, right? That it was my responsibility to apply that patch.
Right. The vendors, I want to pick on again.
Yeah,
I want to pick on anyone, but
yeah.
the vendor's going to say, you should have applied the patch.
Yeah.
The automobile manufacturer is going to say, you should have worn your seatbelt.
Yeah.
You should have patched that.
You should have been driving 100 miles an hour. Maybe that's a different analogy.
Yeah. I don't know.
Is Tesla with the Cybertruck going to say you should have cleared the snow from that little ledge?
Did you hear
that blocks? Did you see that video? I had never seen this before, where the snow builds up on the little ledge that blocks the headlights.
Did you hear Tesla canceled the Cybertruck today?
Oh, did they really?
They stopped production on all models.
Thank
you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.
I will say it was starting to grow on me, but the more I read, Bill, about the design flaws in it, I was less than impressed. And also I experienced a very not a major design flaw, because you can fix it right in software, but the headlights on. I went off on a tangent.
Bear with me.
Just bear with me for a moment.
Welcome to Paul's Tesla Weekly.
Well, if we're going to do that, then I want to include things about semi-trucks, but continue.
Okay, so the headlights on my Model Y, right, weren't aligned properly. They were aligned like slightly up. So what that means is when I'm driving at night,
you're blinding people.
I'm blinding people, and so that means about 15% of the time, 10-15% of the time, the oncoming cars
flashing high beams
at me. And so my strategy was to flash my high beams back at them and beep the horn, which takes in great like mental acuity or whatever it's called. I was ready for it, right? Like I'm ready for it. Like F you, my high beams are not on.
Ready for the deer, the black ice to flash and beep.
Until the other night when I was driving, and this gigantic pickup truck not only flashed its high beams at me, but came into my lane like it was going to ram me off the road. And then I was like, all right, like, first of all, I have dash cam footage and I will find you, by the way. And I saw where you turned and I have you on my dash cam footage. That aside,
that guy went to murder over your beams.
And it was at that point where I'm like, I got to look this shit up now. There's got to be something I can do. Now I'm desperate because I'm like, as much as like that guy's going to be reported to police, Secondly, I need to fix this problem, and you can go into the service menu and you can adjust the height of your headlights. And so I adjusted the height of my headlights, and now that doesn't happen anymore. But the point is, I shouldn't have to do that in any case. But
Yeah.
I don't. That doesn't relate to our. Maybe it does relate to our
I
discussion.
don't even know how we got there.
I don't know how we got there either. But that was because that just happened recently.
Well, I mean, well, we need to have our weekly installment of Paul's Tesla Weekly.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I'll give the guys the video clip of the car coming at me, and everyone can help me identify who that was.
This is Paul. Welcome to Paul's Tesla Weekly. This is Bill.
So just the funny part is that's the second mention of that, and that wasn't even on the show. That was earlier.
I know.
Like, so nobody knows.
But
Nobody knows.
the best part of your delivery on that, Bill, was like a complete fucking deadpan.
This is Bill.
This is Bill.
Yeah.
I sell propane and propane accessories.
I do want to say,
I sell security appliances and security appliance accessories.
I do want to say that I do believe this story is fascinating, and it's in the headline of my story number 32. I'm actually surprised you guys didn't latch onto this sooner, but my story number 2 is titled.
Did you not look at Slack? Sorry.
Yeah, I know. No one knows my stories. It's fine. I'll tell you about it.
Dude, it's right fucking there.
Yeah.
You set up a screen for this and everything.
Yeah.
It's right there.
Okay, so 32 is on the list.
Yeah.
A fascinating security model of dark web marketplaces. Now, I summarized this with AI just to have some talking points, but I did read most of the article. Dark web marketplaces. Well, first thing I didn't realize.
The dark web has marketplaces?
No, I knew that. Ross Ulbricht? Ulbricht. I said that right? Because they don't say his name in the article.
That's what his name is now.
Yeah, right. we all, most of us know the story. If you don't, go look it up. Silk Road founder. There's a documentary on somewhere. There's a documentary film, also much written about the whole thing. I don't know how accurate the documentary film was. It's certainly worth a watch if you're in security or technology. What I did not realize was that at some point this year, I dated this back to like May of this year, Trump pledged to commute the sentence of Silk Road founder Ross Ulbricht. I did not. Did you guys know that?
I didn't know that.
No.
I didn't know that either until I read this in the article, and then I had to go fact check it because I'm in security and I'm skeptical, right?
Because the internet.
Because the internet, and then I did quickly fact check it, and apparently that is true.
That he promised to do it, he hasn't done it yet. Obviously,
correct. He has not done it yet. But Ross is in family, obviously, supporters are very excited as they should be. I often don't weigh in on how I feel about things like that, but having read and covered the story and watched the documentary, I don't know that they threw Ross in prison and threw away the key. Is that I don't agree with that. I don't think I'm alone in not agreeing with that, but I don't agree with that. Right? Is that Bill?
You're not alone. That's how I feel too, right? So a lot of times,
I'm sorry, you don't agree with the sentence, or you don't agree with what they reported?
Agree with the sentence. I mean, they gave him life with no parole. Life with no, not even life.
Mm-hmm. So
life, no parole.
So what I find is, with a lot of computer crime, the first time that's tried, they don't really understand what was going on, and they really don't understand the technology, but they want it to be stopped, and so they make an example, right? And so while I personally have very strong feelings about darknet markets and just crime in general, I'm anti-crime, just for the record.
And I don't want to say Ross never did anything wrong either. I don't want to say that, because there is evidence that he did take a hit out on someone that didn't. If you follow the story, that didn't happen. Still, he's not a saint either. I'm not saying that.
But arguably, he went to jail for creating the Silk Road, which was a marketplace just that happened to be used for sale of illegal things.
Yeah, so that the whole hit thing, then he should be charged with that, and then that's a completely different thing.
Did they? That's interesting, Bill. Did they charge him with that, or did they get the evidence thrown out because of the way there was some shady? Well, also that was the story is really fascinating, right? Because there was ATF agents that stole Bitcoin. Right? Was it an ATF agent that stole Bitcoin? It was played by a pretty famous actor in the movie too. Did a great job. It was kind of like he was in the show Brotherhood. The actor that played the law enforcement agent that ends up stealing Bitcoin was the politician in a show called Brotherhood that geographically took place in Rhode Island.
Oh, cool.
Just in case you're
Well,
useless facts from Paul.
So if you want to take that analogy about, and it just came to me about, you throw him in prison, throw away the key for creating a technology or creating a marketplace where it happened to be used for selling illegal goods. You should take Tim Berners-Lee and put him in prison because he created a technology and he created the internet where you can buy cell phone jammers, which are illegal.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, bringing it back to 32 to your story, right? So have any of you guys ever put up a Tor server before? You probably not, right?
No, I haven't.
Well,
I've run. So funny story. I have been the security engineer responsible for a network that at one time hosted the largest Tor exit node on the internet.
Interesting.
Wow.
I need to put that on like my resume or
you should.
Yeah.
business card or something.
I would really, really recommend everyone if you feel very comfortable spinning up just an Nginx web server on your own, whatever on the normal web, go put up a dark web server. It is so eye opening. It doesn't take long. The instructions are great. It's actually pretty easy to do. And it's worth that learning.
I think we should like share show notes like on the dark web just because we can, right? Like that should be.
I mean, nobody's looking at them anyway, so why not?
Yeah, I know, right? Like, why not just keep it to really keep it to us, right? Like, yeah. If you want the show notes, you got to get on the dark web. I'm sorry, like that's the way it is right now. That'd be awesome, dude. I'd love that.
That's hilarious. Like,
I
don't make the decisions around here, right?
and to make it even more exclusive, if you're using the browser agent string of what Tor browser, you're out too.
You're out. Nope. Yeah,
you're out.
Yeah.
Oh, but anyway, this article, we just talked about the first sentence in the article. That's how. So the second start of the second paragraph is even more like outlandish and hilarious. So it says, since the fall of Silk Road, the demand for illicit substances has not disappeared, and that isn't shocking, which is hilarious in so many ways. The very first transaction on the internet was weed sold between university students over ARPANET and provides a reference. Now, I haven't completely fact-checked that, but the fact that they provided a reference was fact-checking for me enough.
But I've heard that other places again.
Okay,
I feel like that.
Circumstantial evidence. Okay, we'll go with it. The first transaction on the internet was for weed, which doesn't surprise me, which is hilarious. So then he goes on to say many marketplaces have cropped up and gone away. What did he say? The average lifespan
8 months
is 8 months for a dark web marketplace, except for this one marketplace that or this person, I should say, did not disclose, which is fine. If you want to go figure out what it is, you can.
It's not. It was allegedly not hard to figure it out. He's not
a secret. Yeah, it's not a secret, but for whatever reason, they chose not to disclose it. But anyway. Then he talks about how the website that's being analyzed does basically OPSEC and security. They don't run JavaScript. They implement, from what I read, a CAPTCHA not using JavaScript.
Huh.
Using HTML and CSS, they've implemented a CAPTCHA. That's basically the first part of the article, which I think is pretty amazing. Actually,
and then using PGP,
so to the second huge takeaway, Larry astutely pointed out, right, is the usage of PGP in using PGP to sign lists of mirrors, right? Like, I can't really do it justice, but essentially, the way that it was described in the article was, excuse me, from what I read, the PGP public keys were used to validate the actual mirrors for the dark website so that you could validate that.
So the website that I stood up on the dark web, I was doing it for one of the tabletops that we were doing, and I purposefully made it leak IPv4 or not IPv4, but just like clear IP address information, with an IPv4 on the clear net, right? So like what was really interesting to me is, and I really want to go and read this article, is it was very, very easy to create mistakes in a darknet website that would leak information about the server, right? Very, very easy.
So no JavaScript,
Hmm.
not just PGP to validate the mirror list, but also PGP was like your authentication to the site.
Your MFA.
Your MFA, sorry, your MFA to the site.
What do we call not darknet? This the internet, the clear net. What is it?
Yeah, it's like I struggle with that because go back to the top of this segment where I was talking about like Black Lotus, the malware kit. It wasn't. You can't really say dark web or dark net because it wasn't a Tor based, onion router system website that it was being distributed on. It was just in the clear net, but like I don't know. It's not really an illegitimate website. Yeah. It's just
and what is
it's a marketplace, but they're not using Tor technology to present the website. But I struggle with that.
But when you talk about when you talk about the dark web, does the dark web have to be Tor-based onion browsing?
Right. It's another terminology thing. I agree.
I don't know.
Where's Jeff?
I don't know.
Where's
either.
Jeff?
Yeah, Jeff gets really hung up on terminology, huh?
Yeah.
He must be German.
Yeah. Then they talk about the crypto wallet, and it kind of goes on to how they do OPSEC and continue to operate without getting taken down. I thought it was pretty. I don't run across articles like this all the time.
Sidebar navigation was shockingly responsive for a site without JavaScript.
Yeah, like no JavaScript. That's crazy.
An integrated wallet with no JavaScript.
Right? And a captcha with no JavaScript.
Well, the question is, how do they know it has no JavaScript? It could be using, what is it? Node.js?
Well, no JavaScript on the client side.
Right.
I think is what he's saying. When you inspect the DOM, there was no JavaScript being executed in the browser.
Right.
And they're saying it's not used because of the avenues for fingerprinting.
Right, because tracking cookies, basically.
Kind of another tangent, but related because we talked about the ARPANET thing and the weed, and then cryptocurrencies talked about in here. And when I was in Florida, I went to the Papa John's where the first technically recorded purchase by cryptocurrency was carried out.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, the guy that ordered a pizza for 4,000 Bitcoin or whatever.
I think it's 10,000. It's like 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 large pizzas.
Well, worth it at the time.
At the time.
Yeah, and those 2 pizzas are worth what? How many millions of dollars now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Hundreds of millions.
Larry, did you have a story you want to talk about while I have to go pee?
Sure. Where was it? Canada walks back the ban on Flipper Zeros.
Hell yeah.
Oh, or the other one, accused. No, we'll save that one for when you come back, Paul, because accused Kitchener hacker unmasked after threatening woman online.
Yeah, that was pretty lame. I mean, it makes sense, but it was pretty lame.
I mean, I thought this one was fascinating for a couple of reasons. One, Alexander Connor.
Wait, which one are we talking about?
My story number 5.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, this
one's
one,
Allison, right?
Yeah, this is Allison. Like Darwin, was it Darwin posted this in one of our Signal threads? Like, this is stupid.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he knew that we know Allison really well.
Yeah.
And so Allison has made it a career of uncovering all of these bad people and getting them arrested. And despite the fact that she really wasn't even doing anything to this particular individual for whatever was happening with all the stuff that he was doing, decided that he was going to start defaming and attacking and all this stuff against Allison.
Wait, hold on a second. He was attacking Allison?
Yeah.
On Telegram,
Oh.
right? Like
I misunderstood that. I thought she got involved as part of the case. I didn't know that she was the victim.
No, well, she was involved because that she had been investigating the community.
Oh,
And
man, what a poor choice.
Yeah, because so she was investigating the comm, of which the guy now known as Weifu was part of the comm, and then yeah, like apparently she wasn't really even involved in any of the investigation that was going on. She just provided information to law enforcement, and then Weifu starts attacking her.
Huh. What did he like? What kind of attacks was he like? Do you know?
it just says violent threats against her. I
Yep.
think that's all it said.
Yep.
What an idiot.
Yeah, like that was the whole thing, that Allison is like, why would you go attack someone that undercovers bad guys for a living?
That's why I said this is lame. I want to be clear because I don't think the story is lame. I think Weifu doing that is some of the stupidest.
Is this your story number 5?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Allison story. Yeah. Yep.
Allison story?
He
Allison
repeatedly threatened her and her company on Telegram, which were not even working on the Snowflake hack at the time. Why would he target a company that is not working on his case and specializes in identifying cyber criminals? This is just the stupidest thing ever.
Well, because obviously they felt threatened, right? And I mean, that just shows you the kind of work that Allison and company does is to make people feel threatened. Because if basically you're a cyber criminal and doing unethical shit, that's the kind of people that Allison are like, oh, I'm going to find you and I'm going to out you. Because that's the kind of person she is. I mean, she's going to be a host on the show.
Yeah.
She's an amazing person, working with
Absolutely.
amazing people. So, I mean, I hate that happened, but it doesn't surprise me that happened.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, our guest, I believe, was it last week?
Sure.
Yeah, you weren't here. You weren't here last week. Well, like our guest last week was talking about uncovering the criminal activity and how they were also the victim of people trying to attack them. But to me, that just means like you're doing God's work, man. like you're, yeah, yep. So,
yeah, but still, like, even if you are, like, does it really make sense to go attack the people that are specialized in uncovering those exact kind of behaviors?
Oh, yeah,
like,
it's picking a fight with the wrong people. Yeah,
With the wrong
like
people.
1,000%, like 1,000%.
But it does say that Weifu was living in his grandfather's house, so maybe it just goes along with a lot of rage that was built up in his life choices.
Maybe. Yep.
I mean, it's the same reason I don't like tell Mike Tyson that his last fight sucked. Right? Like,
Man, you got a lisp and your last fight sucked. Like, say that to Tyson's face, all right? That's right up there with sealing his tiger. You saw what happened, all right?
Right. Nope. Not going to do it. Not going to do it.
I can feel it coming. Boom.
Yep. Actually, I think it's boom. I can feel it coming. Man, that guy is fast. Like,
yes.
This coming from the guy that got punched in the face at karate yesterday by like 14-year-olds.
Oh, it sucks getting punched in the face. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, when I was doing martial arts, getting punched in the face is the worst.
He broke my glasses. He broke my glasses. He hit a guy wearing glasses.
What it does is it make you not want to get punched in the face. It's a highly motivating.
Yep.
Just like when you get breached, yeah.
So let's talk about my story number 1. The FBI warned
your story number 2 and your story number 3. It's
right. All my stories, like all my stories today.
Put all your eggs in one basket.
That's true. It's a great one. FBI warns iPhone and Android users, stop sending text messages. So CISA and the FBI are warning Americans to use encrypted messaging and phone calls where they can. So that they're saying, and we've talked about this for the last couple of weeks now, that the United States has been notifying that Chinese hacking of U.S. telecom networks is increasing and ongoing, and now they're stating are likely larger in scale than previously understood. And so just want to take this as the moment to, so I don't know how you guys work, but I do not text. I only signal. If you want to talk to me, I only via signal is how I operate. So just wondering how you guys feel about
Oh,
that.
anything is somewhat meaningful. Yeah, signal.
Yeah.
Signal.
Signal.
Stupid,
Yeah.
stupid stuff. Whatever.
Yeah.
Tech.
My wife asking me if we got enough half and half from the grocery store.
Yep, that's still over Signal. And, so the way that I have my Signal is set up is by default, when you text me or we create a Signal group or whatever, messages delete after 7 days. We've talked about that before.
You love
and
disappearing messages.
I-
It's your
listen,
favorite feature in Signal.
It keeps your phone running faster. You can say whatever you want. I can be Bill, and only have to deal with the
Hey man,
consequences.
you
for
can
7
always
days.
be Bill and always
Yeah.
be Bill because
Yeah.
you're the Bill we love.
Yeah, but just take that. So now we have the U.S. government saying use encrypted messaging. So
Actually, I heard on the news today that it was the only messages that you should use are the ones that show up blue.
I appreciate that joke.
I just I know we're running short on time. I did want to cover Qualys, my story number 29, local privilege escalation in Linux in the need restart. If you've ever updated an Ubuntu system,
Nope.
I just did that this morning. I just put Ubuntu on the systems here that run the podcast. I updated them this morning, and I saw the message like, "Hey, your system requires a restart after you apply updates." Most of us just usually curse, myself included. Like
I'm not
what
running Windows. What the hell do I have
I'm
to
like,
reboot
what the
for?
fuck? I gotta reboot now.
Yeah.
But Qualys researchers, who are awesome, by the way, we've interviewed them on past shows. They see this and they're like, but what drives that message? How do you know you need to reboot? And you know what they found out? I love this and I hate this all at the same time. I love what the Qualys researchers, their thought process and investigation was fascinating. The fact that they uncovered that we rely on Perl scripts that were developed in 2014 to provide us with the notification to make analyze what was been updated and determine if you need to reboot the system or not is based on a Perl script that was developed in 2014. This vulnerability goes back to 2014 when this was implemented. It's in every Ubuntu server installation since 21.04.
Whoa.
And there's multiple local privilege escalation exploits in this code. All because they were updating Ubuntu systems and they were like, wait, it says scanning processes and then it determines whether or not it displays the message if the server should be rebooted. How does that work? And they say, we quickly found out that this message is printed by need restart, a tool that scans the userland processes that need to be restarted after package installation, upgrade, or removal.
Running as root.
Running as root. Yeah. Outstanding work by the Qualys team. I love that. We need more folks like the Qualys team that are looking at our open source software in this particular perspective and in this light, shining a light on, kind of like when you get the black light in the hotel room, like, oh, it's really been going on here.
Sometimes you don't want to know.
Yeah, but in this case we do. They're like, they shine the black light and they're like, oh, there's a Perl script from 2014 that's doing this that has root privileges. Like, thankfully, we have the Qualys team.
And
where's
the TV remote been?
God,
Look at their write up. Look at their write up.
Oh, their write up is fantastic.
Oh my god.
Oh,
there's a Pearl Jam quote at the top. Like, come on, man, that's so funny.
A treasure of the internet. In their write ups, just make them a treasure of the internet. It really does. So, thank you for that. If you miss e-zines, check out my story number 30. This one's pretty good. I think we've talked about e-zines in the past. There's been a resurgence of e-zines. This one's called Paged Out. I read through some of the articles in there. I thought it was fascinating. They've got this thing where paged out means every write-up is a page. I love that. Cool. Right? Like it's one page, that's it. Great stuff there. So
Yes, yeah. This one is actually pretty damn. I mean, paged out has been pretty good when I've been following along on this one.
Also, I was today years old when I realized there are CVE IDs designated to use as samples. I did not know that until Jericho wrote the blog, which I read in the past week or so. So if you want to use it like a example, like example.com, like if you need an example CVE, there are ones designated for that. And there's about 8 of them that are designated for that. I did not know that.
I didn't either.
So with that,
How
about we note that Canada walks back the ban on Flipper Zero?
as we anticipated, again, I mean, we started this whole show talking about a million different gadgets that can be used for all kinds of hacking things that we recommend, that we're actively experimenting with, that we're
the clear one.
we're playing. I put the latest version of Momentum on my Flipper this morning.
Bill's is better than yours. He's got the clear one.
He has the clear one. He's definitely more elite than elite. But yeah, I mean, you can't go banning devices and expect security to increase.
No,
it's the devices that help us increase security.
Right.
It's the opposite of what, and I'm glad Canada's coming around to that.
Now, don't get me wrong. It's the headline there is it targets illegitimate use cases. I mean, I think, great, don't ban it. But when you discover one that was used in pursuit of a crime, you should have some additional book thrown at you for something.
Just like lockpicks, right?
It's intent. I mean, we need to ban the criminals, not the tools they use.
Right. Like I want gun culture in the U.S. Like I want a silencer on my 22 so that I can, kill rats that are in my backyard and not disturb the neighbors. Right.
Oh my God, dude! I thought you were going to say something else.
No.
It so dark.
Kill rats, the furry rodents in the backyard, and not disturb the neighbors. But that's legitimate use. But when I go and use that in commission of a crime and rob a bank and shoot the teller, different story.
Well, that concludes this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. Larry, take us out.
Over.